Welcome back to Reading Bear. Today, we will take a look at some new revenge stories. And if you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comments. Let's go!
The first one is titled Evil Roommate Steals Needles from Hospital and Loses $2K. Some background: I work in the military as medic and live in the barracks. All the personnel living in my barracks work at the hospital as medics too. The way our barracks room is set up, there are 2 rooms that house 1 person each and a small, shared common space with 1 bathroom. Since the pandemic, the CO, commanding officer, of the base had people living in the barracks to double up to make room to quarantine those who are from the ships. So now each room had 2 people, a total of 4 people sharing a tiny common space. I didn't have to move rooms, but someone moved into mine, so I had to make space. We'll call her Sally. The room was already small, so cramming another person was less than ideal, but there's nothing we can do. I was also a minimalist, so I was able to give Sally more than half my living space and allowed her to hang up any artwork or photos to make it more comfortable for her. I also had an extra mattress foam topper that I gave her because the beds are awful. At first I thought she was okay. I laid out my rules clearly because I've had troubling roommates before. My rules were simple. 1. Don't have people over or throw barracks parties in my room because, social distancing, and I still have valuables and I don't know her friends. 2. Be clean. 3. If I do something you don't like, tell me right away. No passive-aggressive shit and I'll do the same. She seemed to be okay with the rules, but boy was I wrong. The hospital we worked at had each department manning be down 50%, so we didn't work every day, and Sally and I had different schedules. The nights before I work she would go to some other person's room to party, not allowed but none of my business. But she would come home around midnight plastered drunk, making a lot of noise, and go into our fridge, that was in our tiny room that she stuffed with alcohol way above the allowed amount, and grab more alcohol while lighting up the whole room and clinking the bottles. She'd leave and then come back again around 3 a.m. making even more noise, and before she goes to bed she would play the TV full volume and light up the whole room, or have her Alexa blast heavy bass music that shook the room. This would happen nearly every night. I already have insomnia and have mental problems, and not sleeping wasn't helping. I've confronted her about it and she said okay, but she didn't change. I've talked to my chain of command and they couldn't do anything because rooms are limited, but they offered to talk to her chain. We work different departments. The other 2 roommates in the other room even told her to keep the noise down at night, and one even called her out for being stupid and selfish. Sally didn't care. I ended up buying a $300 noise-cancelling headset to drown out her bass and other ruckus. Thank you, Bose. Things got worse when I was put on night shift. I'd sleep throughout the day and my shifts were 12 to 14 hours, so I was exhausted when I got home. Thankfully she stayed out most of the day, so I was able to sleep. But when I would come home I would clean up after her before I would sleep. Trash was everywhere. I'd vacuum. I even bought her a small drawer so she has more storage. One day after work I came home and I couldn't find my new headset. In the middle of looking for them, Sally came home for lunch and I asked her where they were. She found them on her bedpost. I asked why they were there. Sally: oh, they fell from the side table so they moved them. Me: they. This is when she knew. She ducked up. Sally: yeah, I had a few people over last night. Me: trying to be calm. Why did you have people over last night? I told you that I wasn't comfortable with that because I don't know your friends. These are expensive headphones. Sally: I know, I apologize, they were just trying to move them out of the way. Me: another thing, I left my headset on my bed. Why would they be in the way? Sally: she knew. She ducked up again. Me: don't have people on my bed. And I don't care if you party somewhere else, just don't do it here. After she left I let my chain know what happened and that I'm not comfortable sleeping in my own bed. Chain is trying to help, but moving me is still low priority. Since we're in the middle of a pandemic and all, fast forward a few days, I come home from work and I noticed my bed was messed up. I smelled my covers and noticed someone else's smell. I immediately washed my sheets and told my chain again. I work again that same night and was now going to lose some shut-eye because I have to wash my stuff. I confronted her again and she half apologized. I knew that no matter what I say, she is still going to do what she wants. Since I've been working nights, she's been blasting her bass all throughout the night, and not only can the other 2 roommates hear her and have asked her to turn it down, the 4 people living directly below us can hear her and have asked her to turn it down. She would say okay to everyone but continued to do what she wanted. Finally someone filed a noise complaint about her to her chain. Sally came home crying saying, "I can't sleep with headphones because I move a lot in my sleep and they will come off. And I need the bass because it helps me sleep, and my favorite one to the other 2 roommates, I leave the deadbolt open on my door so you can come in the room and tell Alexa to turn off when I sleep. I don't like having the door open, but I do it as a favor for you." She claimed to have been sexually assaulted during a room inspection and doesn't like having the door bolted open. But she is the only one that bolts the front door open too. That leads to the hallway so anyone can come in every night, but hey, you can choose to believe her or not. After that day, things were tense, but she turned the music down, but she still was a stupid drunk every other night and had people over. She tried to make me look like the bad roommate and she was a victim somehow, but I volunteer a lot and have a lot of friends throughout the hospital including her upper chain, so no one believed her. Finally she did something that would get me away from her forever. I came home one night and saw trash as usually and started putting things away and cleaning up. There was a trash bag that wasn't there before I left. While putting her things away in her drawer, I saw a load of needles and gloves, about 13 to 15 syringe needles. I immediately messaged a friend who worked in her department and asked if they were allowed to bring home needles. He said no and that he was working duty last night at the hospital, and Sally came in drunk at 8 p.m, literally 30 minutes after I left for work. The people working duty didn't know she was drunk at first, and Sally asked if they can let her in her work area for something. One person didn't see why not and let her in without supervising her. This is when they suspect she snuck the needles. When they checked on her, they realized she was drunk and kicked her out. My friend advised me to make a video as evidence that it's hers because he was now liable to report the incident. As I was talking to my friend, I was still cleaning, and as I was tossing trash in the trash bag, I saw so much bloody gauzes and uncapped needles in the plastic bag. Sharps have to be tossed in a sharps container, and where I'm at, locals go through the trash and properly sort them. And if a local were to get stuck by one of those needles, the base would get in so much trouble. So I recorded that too. A roommate from the other room came home and I asked her if people were over the night before, and she said yes, and I showed her the bag and drawer of needles and asked if she knew anything about it, and she was just as shocked as I was. The revenge, finally. I sent everything to my chain and was interviewed by Sally Chain and told them everything and was moved out that day. The military police was called to my room to investigate. Unfortunately Sally came home before them because someone warned her. She had the audacity to move the needles in the common area to try to blame another roommate, but my video evidence, the testimonies from myself and the other roommate, and her history shuts her down. When I moved out, I took everything, from the drawers I bought her, the hooks on the wall, my blackout curtains, my cleaning supplies, my extension cords, to the pins on the cork board. Additionally, the CO put her on restriction for 30 days and she had no electronics and had extra duty, and deducted 2 months of half pay, which runs up to be $2,000. The best revenge is how she's now socially outcasted from all this. During the investigation, she threw so many people under the bus to try to save herself. She might have gotten more punishments, but that was all I heard. She already has a reputation of getting irresponsibly drunk, getting into fights, lying, and skipping out of work. I've talked to her chain and they've described her as selfish and a pathological liar and don't pity her. This event just showed everyone her true colors. Another ending. Because of my event, the hospital CO had to investigate what the base CO did and saw that the quarantine rooms were never used to their max occupancy, and the ships at this point had their own quarantine system. Everyone in the barracks was able to move back to their original rooms and no one was doubled up anymore. Also, I was never told what she used the needles for. She tested negative for drugs and there was no evidence of drug use in the room. The next one is titled, "If the lecturer wants to treat people with disrespect, then karma will bite him big time." A little backstory. I suffer from depression. From what we can work out, I have actually suffered from it since I was about 5 or 6 years old, no idea what triggered it. As a result, all through my life I have tried to make sure others are happy, even if it comes at the expense of my own happiness. And yes, I have had suicidal thoughts, and tried to kill myself, numerous times. But again, if I know someone in the same situation, I will go out of my way to help, to try to provide relief, to try to make things better to some degree. This is a story about how the actions of one lecturer at university almost destroyed a person's will to succeed, but a small matter of pro-revenge turned things around. For the purposes of this, I will be me, lecturer will be named Mr. Vital, and my friend will be named Sonia, obviously not their real names. So Sonia and I were in a marketing-related class together at university. She wasn't doing marketing, but chose this particular subject as an elective. Our whole class had about 35 students. We met once a week for a 2-hour lecture, and again later in the week for a 1-hour tutorial, where the class would be separated into 2 separate tutorial classes. Mr. Vital was our lecturer, and it seemed as though he had a thing against certain students right from the start of the class. For me, when I only got a pass mark in one assignment, he said to me in front of the class, "Maybe you shouldn't be at university, coming from the country." Another person, who had a physical handicap with one arm, he said, "How can you expect to have a marketing career if you don't have 2 hands to hold a piece of paper?" There were other instances like that, but the worst was when he made a comment about a presentation of Sonia's. One of the tasks we had to do was design a radio ad. Because I had selected a radio broadcasting subject for one of my electives, I had access to the university's radio studios, and was the only person doing this marketing course who had unlimited access. Everyone else had to book in to use one of the studios, and you only got a 1-hour block once to do your recording. Because I got along with Sonia, we had some mutual friends at the university, and I was the only person she kind of knew doing this marketing subject. I let her tag along with me to the radio studios one weekend, so she could record her radio ad. We spent probably 2.5 hours perfecting it. Sonia had recorded a very powerful 30-second radio ad about suicide prevention and awareness. Quite frankly, it blew mine out the window. Mine was advertising a new fictitious product for a Scottish restaurant with a big yellow letter. Since suicide was obviously close to my heart, I wanted to make sure that Sonia's ad was the best it could possibly be. It came time to play the ads in the weekly lecture, so everyone could hear everyone else's ad, and ask questions afterwards. When it came to mine, people got a good laugh from the food concept. When it came to Sonia's, I kid you not, everyone stood and clapped, and I reckon there were even several people who had tears. It was that moving. We finished listening to the ads, the lecturer writing down notes after each ad, and then saying he will give out the grades next week. Come the following weeks, and the grades are given out during the lecture, as well as comments on each person's ad. I got a comment that the ad was a bit stunted, but it was an interesting food concept, and still got a B+. When it came to Sonia, the lecturer only gave her a D. Everyone in the class was shocked. Sonia was nearly in tears. The lecturer then went to his comments. Said that the ad was not believable. Anybody who suffers from depression is just weak and sad, and just need to grow up. There was no point to the ad, if people don't understand the message, and this ad had no legitimate message to it. Then he said that the world would not need an ad like this, because if people were actually serious about killing themselves, they would actually do it, and not just talk about it. No radio station in the world would ever play it. Sonia ran out of the room crying. The class was silent, and the lecturer was even looking red in the face after that outburst. I walked out of the room, and tried to find Sonia. I saw her in a corner, curled up, crying. I calmed her down, walked her home, and then started working out how I could get revenge on Mr. Vital. Back then, there was no social media. There was no posting things every 5 seconds on YouTube. And most mobile phones at the time did not even take photos, let alone videos. So without a physical recording, it was going to be our word against his. So I started asking around some of our other classmates. Some were willing to help, and were ready to sign sworn statements of what he said. Others were sympathetic, but wanted to stay out of it. So I started researching how to complain about a lecturer for unfair treatment. Most of the university's policy surrounding complaints specifically mentioned written assignments. They had not factored in assessments that were not in writing. I had a flatmate who was a third-year law student, who went over the university's policy for me, and said without physical proof, even with witnesses, the policy is slanted towards the lecturers, and not the students. So I had to start looking at other ways, outside of the university's policy, to gain revenge. Unbeknownst to me, one of the guys in the class had actually recorded what Mr. Vital had been saying. The student had a hearing problem, so would often record lectures onto a tape to make sure he didn't miss anything. I ran into him during another class, and mentioned the predicament. He mentioned that he had finished with his recording of the lecture, so I was free to have it if I wanted it. So I got it off him, and listened to it. The recording was literally a goldmine. But I couldn't work out what to do with it to maximum effect. Then I had an idea. I had a meeting scheduled with another lecturer, who I got along great with. My life and his life shared a lot of similarities, such as our backgrounds, and even our fathers' occupations. We would often chat about non-course subjects outside of class. This meeting was about a pamphlet I was designing, and wanted some advice on graphics for it. I thought, as a longshot, to take the recording, as well as Sonia's ad, with me. So I sat down, and discussed what I needed to with him. I then casually asked him about his thoughts on Mr. Vital. The lecturer told me not to repeat it to anyone, but Mr. Vital has visions of grandeur. Mr. Vital knows that the dean of the faculty is looking at retiring in the next year or two, and he heard on the grapevine that Mr. Vital is jockeying for the dean's job. The lecturer told me that almost the entire faculty hates Mr. Vital. So I mentioned Sonia's problem to the lecturer. I mentioned to the lecturer how the university's policy is a grey area when the assignment is not a written one, so the lecturer said he will take a listen to it. I played him Sonia's ad, then Mr. Vital's comments. The lecturer was absolutely shocked. He said that was a broadcast quality radio ad, and could not fault it. Said the ad had a great message to it. The lecturer said to wait in his office, as he was going to see if the dean of the business faculty was free. He said that this is something that the dean may be interested in hearing, although again not much could be done because of the university policy. The dean was free, so we walked into the dean's office. It was just down the hall. Same thing from the dean, great ad, does not know what Mr. Vital was thinking. The dean asked me to come by his office, with Sonia, the following day at midday. The lecturer was asked to come along as well. No mention of Mr. Vital at this stage. We had no idea why the dean wanted us there, including Sonia. Sonia and I meet up with the lecturer, and we get to the dean's office. Already sitting in the dean's office is the vice-chancellor of the university, and another person who we did not recognize. We went through the same thing with the vice-chancellor, playing the ad, then Mr. Vital's comments. The vice-chancellor also said that the ad was well produced, strong message, etc. Then the unknown person in the room spoke. He introduced himself as the head of programming for the main local commercial radio station. He wanted to know whether he could pay Sonia for the ad, with making only a minor edit, the use of copyright music. Sonia had a huge smile on her face, and then said that they could have it for free. Side note, the radio station played it for the next 2 years. As for Mr. Vital, the following week, there was someone else doing the lectures and the tutorials. We were told that Mr. Vital was not going to be teaching the class for the rest of the semester. I later found out that Mr. Vital's tenure was coming to an end at the university at the end of the semester, and the university had been considering whether to extend it. Obviously, if he was being considered as a replacement for the dean, they definitely would be extending his tenure. After his comments, the vice-chancellor elected not to, but chose until the last minute to say anything to Mr. Vital. As a result, the best Mr. Vital could achieve for a job the following year was working for one of those private tutorial services, earning a lot less than he would have as a university lecturer. The lecturer I had a drink with a few weeks ago, where I am, while there are restrictions, but no major lockdowns. As this happened 20-odd years ago, the lecturer has since retired, but I do meet up with him from time to time. And in case anyone wants to know, last I heard Sonia now lives in the US, is married, has 3 kids, and works for a suicide prevention organization. The last one is titled, Mooching, friend, adds me to a robocall list. Guess you're fired. My mum has this tendency to attract shady people. They're always fun to hang out with when I'm with her, but never someone I'd hang out with one-on-one, or even trust to leave alone in my home. They almost always have some reason for the hustle, like a bunch of kids, but never want to do any real work. Instead, they mooch off of whoever they see as an easy mark. One of these people is Sally. Sally has 4 kids, all by different dads, and she does whatever she can to keep the kids from the dads unless she needs a sitter. Sally refuses to get a real job, and instead bums rides, money, smokes, and whatever else she needs that her small amount of support and public funds won't cover. Now, this is going to sound snobby, but I'm a higher tax bracket. My husband and I married when I was 21. We focused on my education and his career, and when I was in my early 30s had 2 children. We waited until we were financially stable, his career was secure, and I was able to be a stay-at-home mum. Basically, we worked our butts off for the first 10 years of our marriage and saved so that we were debt-free and owned our first home by the time kid 1 was born. My mum introduced me to Sally not long after my second was born. We had moved to our current home, which we bought for an insane deal since the bubble had burst. Seriously, this place would have been a good $100K out of our range if the bubble hadn't burst and my husband hadn't received a hefty sellout for a company he was a founder of. Since we don't really need the money from resales, anytime my kids outgrow something, I give it away. We didn't have money when I was a kid, so my view is that I should give my gear to someone who was in a similar spot. Everything from clothing to toys, and baby gear. I try to find people who I know really need the stuff, and they always get first dibs. Sally was the person I was doing this for at the time. I gave her a collapsible stroller, baby pens, car seats, bouncy gyms, you get the idea. I basically gave her a couple thousand in used stuff because I knew she needed it. Well, it started feeling less like helping out my mum's friend and more like I was being hustled. For example, we invited her kids to my kid's birthday party, and she insisted we allow her son to blow out candles too because my son and her son's birthday were just a few days apart. Another time she scolded my kid for drawing on his jeans washable markers because it would hurt their resale value. So, I began the slow process of cutting her off because I don't do drama like that. So, Sally moved across town. I didn't hear anything else from her for a couple years. One day, out of the blue, I get a text from a number I didn't recognize. IT said, "Hey, it's Sally. I'm working at a booth at the fair getting number for roof bids. I'm putting everyone I know on my list so I can make my quota and leave for the day. You don't have to buy, just tell him you changed your mind." I called my mum, she got the same message, and she hadn't heard from her a couple years either. Within the week, I started getting robocalls from a ducking roofing company. The first few, I just let go to voicemail. Then one day I answered. They started their pitch and I told them that not only did I not sign up, but that their employee had sent me a text telling me what she did. The woman on the phone was shocked and upset. She asked if I had proof. I told her I had the texts to back it up, as did my mother who was also getting calls. She sent me her email address and I sent her screenshots from both of us. That's when she told me that the list she had was one they distributed through a network of home improvement companies and that I'd still get calls, but she'd make sure I was off the next list that went out the next month. About 3 days later, I got a text from Sally that she had been written up and that I was a witch for turning her in, and how I was taking food out of her kids' mouths. So yep, guess who got screenshots of that text too? I got a follow-up email saying that they had fired Sally and that if I received anything else from her, they advised I call an attorney for harassment, but they could do no more. Neither one of us have heard from Sally since. Thanks for listening.